There is a peculiar ache that no companionship seems to soothe. You might be surrounded by voices, affection, even touch, and yet, deep within your chest, a silent heaviness remains. A vague emptiness, a distance between you and the world, and, more painfully, between you and yourself. It feels like watching life from behind glass, unseen and untouched. This is not mere loneliness, nor is it emotional neediness. It is a spiritual signal. A quiet cry from the depths of your psyche, whispering that you have strayed from your own soul. Carl Jung called this phenomenon inner emptiness, a psychological and spiritual void born not from the absence of others, but from the abandonment of the self. He observed that many of his patients did not suffer from overt mental illness, but from something far more insidious, a loss of meaning, a disconnection from the symbolic inner world. The soul, neglected and silenced, begins to starve. And so, without realizing it, we drag this invisible hunger into every relationship, unconsciously hoping that another person might nourish the parts of us we have long refused to face. This is where intimacy becomes illusion. We expect lovers to rescue us, friends to complete us, partners to patch over the fracture we have yet to acknowledge within. And when they cannot do what they were never meant to do, when they do not heal the wound, when they do not soothe the ache, when they fail to mirror back the forgotten self, we feel betrayed, let down, abandoned again. But what collapsed was not love, it was projection, a fantasy built on an inner fracture we never turned toward. And so the pattern repeats. You wander from relationship to relationship, or remain in one that feels flat and emotionally sterile, chasing sparks that were never lit from within. The emptiness persists not because people failed you, but because you have not yet met yourself. The wound is not in the other. It is in the shadow you disown. In the unloved feminine energy within, in the disfigured masculine you unknowingly project. It is in the soul you have ignored, suffocated by a life turned outward in its search for validation. Jung once warned that the modern person does not suffer from mere pathology, but from the absence of meaning, from a spiritual amnesia that disconnects them from their true source. And as long as you avoid the descent into your own depths, as long as you keep hoping someone else will complete you, the cycle will continue. Not because you are broken, but because you are asleep to your own wholeness. This message is not a promise of easy healing. There are no shortcuts to the inner world. But this is an invitation, a descent into the hidden layers of your psyche, where truth lives beneath illusion. What you feel is not insignificant. It is your unconscious, asking, pleading, demanding to be heard. And now is the moment to listen. If you are willing, if the ache within you has ripened into readiness, then come with me. We will not climb upward to escape, we will descend. Into the forgotten places, into the shadow, into the origin of your longing. Because only there, in what you have not yet dared to face, lies the key to everything you hope to feel. The most destructive form of psychological suffering today is not the one that erupts loudly. It does not make headlines. It does not cry out for help in a way the world can easily notice. It whispers, quietly, repeatedly. Day after day, it hums beneath the noise of routine, until the individual becomes so accustomed to the emptiness that they forget they are starving. You wake, you function, you perform, you speak when spoken to, meet your deadlines, scroll through endless content, attend social gatherings, and smile when required. But behind it all, something remains untouched, something sacred and silent. It is as if your life is being lived by someone else, a version of you on autopilot, present in form, but absent in essence. This form of inner erosion does not appear in the manuals of psychiatry. It has no official diagnosis, no dramatic symptoms. Instead, it seeps in like fog, gradual, unnoticeable, until life itself begins to lose its taste, its texture, its depth. Carl Jung saw this affliction with harrowing clarity in what he called Modern Man in Search of a Soul. He observed that many of his patients did not suffer from neurosis in the traditional sense, but from something more insidious, a slow spiritual starvation. These individuals, often seen as successful by external standards, bore the heaviest inner burden. They had careers, families, relationships, social esteem, and yet, beneath the layers of achievement, they felt hollow, disconnected from something elemental. What they lacked was not affection, money, or validation. What they lacked was soul. In Jungian psychology, the soul is not a mystical abstraction. It is the symbolic core of our being, the wellspring of meaning. It is what renders even ordinary moments profound, what imbues existence with vitality and purpose. And when this symbolic dimension is neglected, life collapses into a mechanical repetition of roles. The individual becomes adapted to the outer world, but exiled from their inner one. They are praised for their productivity, but they are dying inside. And this psychic malnourishment eventually finds expression. Sometimes it comes as chronic boredom, other times as persistent fatigue, low-grade despair, or a sense that nothing, no matter how promising, feels alive. It is in this barren inner landscape that relationships begin to falter. The soul, having been silenced within, begins to cry out through longing. We unconsciously expect the other to save us. We hope that love will resurrect the spark we have long extinguished within ourselves. That connection will lift the unbearable weight of spiritual disconnection. But the other is just as lost. They, too, are likely wandering in their own inner desert, wearing masks they have forgotten how to remove. And so the meeting of two unanchored souls becomes a stage for projection, unmet expectations, and the reawakening of hidden wounds. Modern culture, with its relentless worship of productivity, acquisition, and appearance, has amputated the bridge between the ego and the soul. We are trained to perform, to accomplish, to curate our lives for public display. But we are not taught to listen to the quiet murmurs within. We silence dreams, we dismiss intuition, we ignore discomfort that lacks a name. And yet, the soul does not forget. The more we repress it, the more it rebels. And its rebellion often takes form in the most vulnerable places, in our relationships, where we are most exposed. The ache you feel, the emotional collapse you fear, is not your undoing. It is your summons. It is not the death of connection, but the call to reconnect, to yourself. This is not an ending, it is a threshold, a sacred rupture, because in that fracture lies your first invitation to turn inward, to descend, to face what has been lost in the rush to be acceptable. And it is only when we begin to see that our relationships are not just emotional bonds, but mirrors, reflecting the fragmented parts of ourselves, that true healing can begin. Human relationships, no matter how vivid, passionate, or seemingly authentic they appear, are often not what they seem. Beneath the surface of what we call love, friendship, or even rivalry, lies a far more intricate drama. A psychic play where unintegrated parts of the self are projected onto others like characters on an unconscious stage. When you enter a relationship carrying wounds you haven't faced, desires you haven't acknowledged, or emotions you haven't accepted, you do not see the other person clearly. You see through them. You are not relating to who they are, but to who your psyche imagines they could be. What you reject in yourself becomes cast upon them. What you lack, you demand. What you have not claimed, you search for in another's eyes. Carl Jung warned us of this with sobering clarity. Most human connections are shaped by unconscious projections. You are not falling in love with a person, you are falling into resonance with a symbol, a psychic reflection that mirrors back to you a forgotten part of your own soul. And when that symbol begins to crack, when reality starts to replace projection, you do not see a partner changing, you experience your illusion unraveling. In that moment, you mistake disillusionment for betrayal, when in truth, the betrayal was self-inflicted. You were never loving the person, you were loving what they represented to your unconscious. The redeemer, the nurturer, the savior, the ideal mother, the strong father, the lost twin. This is not romantic idealism, it is the architecture of the psyche. Jung explained that every person carries within them archetypes, primordial images, and emotional patterns that shape the way we perceive the world and those around us. And among the most potent of these are the anima and the animus, the inner feminine within a man and the inner masculine within a woman. When these archetypes are unintegrated, they do not disappear. They live in the shadows, waiting for someone onto whom they can be projected. And so we fall, not in love, but into projection. We expect a partner to carry our vulnerability or our power or our worth. We become emotionally fused, dependent, reactive, or avoidant, not because of who they are, but because of what they unconsciously symbolize to us. This mechanism infiltrates not only romantic love, but friendships, family dynamics, and professional relationships. We project divinity onto mentors, demand salvation from partners, demonize those who challenge us, all in an unconscious attempt to reorganize what was never fully formed within. Your boss becomes your tyrannical father. Your partner becomes your neglected inner child. Your friend becomes the twin soul you were never allowed to meet. And so, without knowing it, you are not engaging with people. You are dancing with the shadows of your psyche. This is not a sign of malice. It is a sign of fragmentation. Most people do not intend to use or distort their relationships. They simply do not know themselves. Jung taught us that what we do not make conscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. And in the realm of relationships, that fate is often repeated heartbreak, unexplainable distance, and a constant sense that something is missing. Again, because what you seek in others is not another. It is a reunion with your own lost wholeness. To begin unraveling this pattern, we must dare to look inward. We must recognize how often we project what we have not yet integrated. Our fears, our longing, our inner masculine or feminine onto those closest to us. It is only through this confrontation that we stop using others as mirrors and begin relating soul to soul. As long as these archetypal forces remain unconscious, they will continue to distort, enchant, and destroy the very intimacy we long to create. And so, the real work of love begins, not with finding the right person, but with reclaiming the lost pieces of yourself. Only then can another meet you, not as a projection, but as a presence. And that is precisely what we will explore in the next part. A deeper descent into the archetypal realms of the anima and animus, the hidden currents that shape not only our relationships, but the very fabric of our emotional reality. What we call love is often not love at all. What we defend as connection is, more often than not, projection. Human bonds, no matter how vivid, magnetic, or soul-stirring they seem on the surface, are frequently built on unconscious enactments, scenes orchestrated by the inner characters we have not yet made conscious. When you enter into relationship without having met yourself first, without having turned inward to face your own wounds, desires, and unclaimed shadows, you are not encountering the other, you are encountering yourself, disguised. Carl Jung expressed this truth with unwavering clarity. Most human connections are shaped by unconscious projections. You are not falling in love with a person, you are falling into resonance with an image, one shaped by forgotten needs, neglected emotions, and unhealed pain. What feels like romantic chemistry is often psychic familiarity. You see not the other, but the redeemer your soul longs for, the mother you never had, the father you still miss, the twin you lost before you ever met. And when the mirage dissolves, when time erodes the fantasy and reality begins to emerge, what you experience is not betrayal, it is awakening. The other has not changed. The projection has simply broken, and that too is sacred. This is not sentimentalism. It is the very architecture of the psyche. Jung taught that we all carry within us archetypal blueprints, primordial patterns that live in the collective unconscious. Among the most powerful are the anima and animus, the inner feminine in the male psyche and the inner masculine in the female psyche. When these forces remain unintegrated, they are not neutral. They do not wait silently. They seek expression through others, hijacking our relationships and distorting intimacy. We assign the other person a role: savior, persecutor, caretaker, or ideal lover, when in truth, they are merely reflecting what we have not yet dared to integrate within ourselves. This phenomenon is not confined to romantic partnerships. It permeates friendships, parent-child dynamics, mentorships, even professional relationships. We make gods of mentors, saviors of lovers, and monsters of those who trigger our wounds. And every time we do, we are unconsciously attempting to rewrite the script of our own unfinished psychological narrative. We are trying to repair what was broken in childhood, to complete what was interrupted, to redeem what was lost. But this never works as long as the content remains unconscious. What you do not own within yourself, you will continue to project onto others and suffer the consequences. It is not cruelty that drives this cycle, it is fragmentation. People do not weaponize love with malicious intent. They do it because they have never learned to love themselves. Jung reminds us, what we do not make conscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. And indeed, in relationships, that fate manifests as repeated heartbreak, inexplicable loneliness, and a haunting emptiness that no one seems able to fill. We do not seek another to know them. We seek another to find the parts of ourselves we have lost. And until we become conscious of this pattern, we will confuse projection for presence, fantasy for love, and control for connection. The only way out is inward. We must stop looking for someone to complete us and start integrating the aspects of our soul that have long been silenced. We must reclaim our disowned inner feminine, our rejected inner masculine, our forgotten essence. Because until we do, our relationships will continue to be haunted, not by the other, but by our own unmet self. As long as these archetypal forces remain in the dark, they will manipulate our most sacred bond. But when brought into awareness, they can be transformed. Then, and only then, does love become real. Not because we have found the perfect partner, but because we have become whole enough to finally meet another. Not through the veil of our projections, but with the full presence of our soul. From our earliest years, we are quietly conditioned, through fairy tales, films, love songs, and societal echoes, to believe in a soul roaming this earth, who will one day complete us. This romantic myth, woven into the collective psyche of the West, has not only shaped how we love, but how we suffer. The idea is seductive. No matter how fragmented you feel, how wounded or hollow, love will arrive as salvation. Someone will see you, hold you, redeem you. But this fantasy, repeated ad nauseum in popular culture and even echoed in diluted forms of therapy, is not harmless. It is spiritually stunting. It postpones the inner work and places the responsibility of healing onto the shoulders of another. It traps the soul in an infantile hope that love will fix what only self-confrontation can. Carl Jung dismantled this illusion with brutal clarity. He revealed that the search for completeness through another is not love, it is avoidance. When one is wholly oneself, Jung observed, there is no need to seek completeness outside. Yet most people, disconnected from their inner life, wander from one bond to the next, not in search of connection, but of psychic rescue. When love is born of need, it mutates into control, possession, and despair. What we so often call falling in love is not an encounter with the other. It is a projection of the anima, or animus, our internal archetype of the opposite, cast outward onto someone who becomes the screen for our unmet longings. We do not see the person, we see the dream. And when reality pierces that dream, what collapses is not love, but illusion. And this collapse feels like betrayal. That is why we are often magnetized by those who make no rational sense, drawn to intensity we cannot explain, and devastated when the other inevitably falls short of the fantasy. It is not that love has failed us. It is that we have misused love as a substitute for wholeness. We demand others heal wounds they never caused. We expect their presence to cover our inner absence. And so, the cycle repeats. Each failed relationship is followed by a new idealization, a new projection, a new hope that maybe this time, this person will be the one. But no human being can carry the weight of what you have refused to integrate within yourself. Jung teaches that every projection is an opportunity for growth. Disappointment is not the end, it is a mirror. The moment the fantasy breaks is the moment the unconscious returns what you tried to place outside. The wound reappears, not to punish you, but to awaken you. The ache you feel in the absence of the other is not proof of their importance. It is a summons to return to yourself. No lover, no ideal partner, no fleeting bond can fill the soul's void. That work is sacred. That work is yours. Wholeness is not found in romance. It is born of integration. The alchemical uniting of opposites. Reason and emotion. Strength and vulnerability. Light and shadow. Masculine and feminine. When you begin to do this inner work, the other ceases to be your savior and becomes your mirror, not someone to carry your pain, but someone who walks beside you in shared presence. True love does not complete, it reflects. But the path to such love is not linear. It is an inner pilgrimage, a descent into one's own psyche, a confrontation with wounds buried, truths denied, patterns repeated. It is the passage Jung called individuation, the sacred process through which you cease seeking yourself in the other and begin reclaiming what was always yours. It is not about needing love. It is about becoming love. It is not about being filled. It is about being whole. In the next part, we will journey into this symbolic terrain, the map of individuation, the descent that leads not to romantic perfection, but to inner coherence. A painful, raw, luminous process, the only real path to transforming not just your relationships, but your very way of being. If these words awaken something within you, if a quiet recognition stirs beneath the surface, then you may find profound value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It does not simplify Jung's wisdom into surface-level advice. Instead, it offers a doorway into the symbolic landscape of your own unconscious, revealing tools to illuminate the inner terrain that too often remains buried beneath a life lived for others. The link is in the pinned comment, but before you open that door, let's speak the truth. You have spent a lifetime trying to become what others needed you to be. You molded yourself to be loved, to be chosen, to be safe. You bent your soul to fit into family structures, cultural scripts, and fragile relationships that never truly saw you. And in that bending, in that slow sacrifice of your own essence, you abandoned the one truth that could have anchored you through it all. The soul. Carl Jung reminds us that the more we orient our gaze outward, seeking validation, affection, identity, the more we sever the lifeline to our inner depths. We may be admired by others, desired even, but we will remain strangers to ourselves. The path of true transformation begins the moment you stop escaping and start descending. Into yourself, into your wounds, into the wild and often uncomfortable terrain of your being. That descent is not self-help. It is not a performance. It is not about becoming impressive in the eyes of the world. It is individuation, the slow, sacred unfolding of who you truly are beneath the masks, the wounds, and the projections. Individuation is not a linear ascent toward self-improvement. It is a spiral into the psyche's forgotten chambers. It calls you to face what you denied, to reclaim what you rejected, to give voice to what you silenced. You must integrate what you split off, the ego and the unconscious, the persona and the shadow, the inner masculine and the inner feminine. This is not metaphor. It is psychic surgery. You will encounter your shame. You will meet your rage. You will sit with the child inside you who still fears abandonment. And in doing so, you will begin to see how much of your relational life was a reenactment of what was never healed. In this crucible, the anima and animus, the inner archetypes of love and identity, cease to haunt your relationships. No longer projected outward, they become inner guides, guardians of balance. The shadow, once a frightening exile, becomes your reservoir of strength. And the ego, once either inflated or fragile, begins to serve rather than dominate. Here lies the threshold. When you stop blaming the external world for your inner pain, when you cease demanding others complete you, you step into your true power. The power of self-responsibility, self-acknowledge, and sacred wholeness. And from that place, everything changes. You no longer enter relationships to be saved. You no longer use others to fill a void you refuse to face. You meet another not from hunger, but from fullness. not to escape loneliness, but to share presence. Relationships become alchemical, two sovereign beings co-creating, not consuming. Love becomes a mirror, not a mask. But let us be honest, this path is not for the faint-hearted. It demands maturity. It demands the death of illusion. You must relinquish the dream that someone else will rescue you and realize this truth, liberating and terrifying, that no one is coming. And in that realization, paradoxically, you are set free. You are no longer waiting at the gates of someone else's heart. You have returned home to your own. Now that you stand at the edge of this understanding, prepare to face the most difficult truth of all, the one that most spend their lives avoiding. As long as you remain disconnected from yourself, no relationship will fulfill you. No love will be deep enough. No partner will ever be enough. Because until you meet your own soul, no one else truly can. And it is precisely this truth we will explore, without numbing, without denial. In the final part of this journey, come closer. What you are looking for has always been waiting within. There arrives a threshold moment, a silent yet undeniable crossing, when you must finally face the truth you have spent your entire life avoiding. No matter how fiercely someone loves you, no matter how much effort you pour into keeping a relationship alive, no matter how deeply you idealize the other, no bond, no matter how sacred or sincere, will ever rescue you from yourself. This is not a cruel truth, it is a liberating one. For as long as you continue to seek salvation through another's affection, you remain shackled to a cycle of projection, expectation, and inevitable disillusionment, a cycle that siphons your vitality and leaves your soul famished. The healing you long for does not reside in someone else's eyes, arms, or promises. It dwells within you. It begins the moment you choose to sit in the quiet company of your own presence, when you finally stop fleeing, numbing, or distracting yourself. It begins when you are willing to face the inner void, not as something to be feared or filled, but as sacred space where your forgotten self waits patiently to be remembered. Healing unfolds the moment you cease casting your shadow onto others and dare to meet it face to face. From that courageous inner encounter, transformation emerges not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Relationships are not the source of your suffering. They are the mirrors, precise, unflinching reflections of your own inner dissonance. When you feel unseen in a relationship, ask yourself, have I been willing to truly see myself? When your voice feels silenced, inquire, have I been listening to the subtle language of my own soul? And when disappointment returns again and again, pause and reflect. Am I asking someone else to fulfill a role that only I can embody? The truth is, no one can meet you where you refuse to meet yourself. But here is the quiet triumph hidden in this truth. The moment you began to question this pattern, the very act of stopping to absorb this message marks the beginning of your return to wholeness. The journey of individuation has already begun. Something within you, ancient, wise, untamed, is no longer content to sleepwalk through life, anesthetized by illusion. It no longer wishes to reenact old wounds, to bleed for love that only mirrors your own self-abandonment. It longs to awaken. And yet, awakening is not soft. It is the tearing down of fantasies, the unmasking of everything you believed would save you. It requires a fierce devotion to truth, even when that truth scorches the carefully constructed dreams you've held about love, the other, and who you thought you had to be. The emptiness you feel is not a failure. It is a message. A sacred call from the depths of your own unconscious. It is the soul, your soul, summoning you back. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that becoming begins not in the arms of another, but in the moment you decide to stop abandoning yourself. When you make the sacred shift from seeking wholeness in another to becoming whole within yourself, something fundamental within you begins to reorganize. A silent alchemy occurs. No longer do you chase love as a remedy for your wounds. No longer do you cling to others in hopes they will complete what you have abandoned in yourself. Instead, you begin to emanate a new kind of energy, one rooted not in hunger but in presence. You no longer attract relationships that demand you shrink, split, or compromise. You begin to draw near those who do not seek to fill your emptiness, but to meet you in the fullness of your being. They do not come as rescuers or saviors. They come as mirrors, reflecting not your lack, but your light. And in this space, something extraordinary becomes possible. You love not from fear of loneliness, but from the clarity of solitude embraced. You relate not as a fragment desperate for repair, but as a soul that has returned to itself. Carl Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This is the awakening, the quiet revolution that reshapes your entire experience of love. To love from wholeness is not to become invulnerable, but to be deeply rooted. It is to walk alongside another, not in pursuit of salvation, but in shared reverence for truth. It is to overflow, not because you are perfect, but because you are no longer hiding. The emptiness that once haunted your relationships dissolves, not because someone came to fill it, but because you found the courage to sit with it, understand it, and finally, to transmute it. This is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a different kind of love, one that does not bind but frees, one that does not devour but nourishes, one that does not ask you to lose yourself but invites you to become even more of who you truly are. If something within you stirred while hearing this message, do not let it fade. Share it with someone whose soul might also be quietly crying for awakening. And if you feel called to continue this inner journey, this unraveling of old patterns and quiet rebuilding of self, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Remember this: love is not a treasure waiting to be found. It is a sacred fire you learn to tend within, patiently, consciously, and with great care. And that act of inner creation begins not tomorrow, but in this very moment. Thank you for walking this path with me. You are not alone in this. I'll meet you in the next video where we go even deeper. Until then, stay awake and stay true.